The rope had already been measured when Elara Voss was brought into the courtyard. Morning had not fully broken over Silverpine, but the square was packed with wolves who had come to watch her die. Torches hissed in the cold mist. Rainwater clung to the black stones beneath her bare feet. Traitor. The word followed her from the dungeon steps. Modea. Elara kept her head up. 27 days in the lower cells had taken weight from her face and strength from her limbs, but not her pride. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders. Silver-laced restraints circled both wrists, burning slow red wounds into her skin and keeping her wolf buried beneath the pain. A guard shoved her forward. Move. She did. At the foot of the platform, Elara looked beyond the executioner toward the eastern wall. The eastern gate. The gate she had opened 1 year ago. The gate that had made her a traitor. 312 names had been carved into the memorial after that night. One belonged to Prince Rowan Thorne. Elara had never forgotten it. The executioner reached for her arm. Then the first war horn sounded. The courtyard froze. A second horn answered from beyond the northern wall. Not Silverpine horns. The crowd erupted. Soldiers shouted from the ramparts. Someone screamed that the outer barricade had fallen. Another voice yelled that northern banners were already inside the lower city. The executioner stepped back. Elara heard the deep thunder of hundreds of boots striking the streets beyond the square. The Winter King had come. Alpha King Cassian Thorne had waited 1 year. Silverpine had broken the winter armistice 3 weeks ago, when Red Hand mercenaries attacked 2 northern supply posts under Silverpine protection. Cassian had answered with an army. Now he was inside the fortress. A captain climbed the platform, pale beneath his helmet. Take the prisoner back below. The sentence, the executioner began. Do you want to finish it while the Northern Crown is taking the keep? Elara was dragged away as panic swallowed the square. By the time she was thrown back into a cell, Silverpine's bells were ringing surrender. Hours later, Alpha King Cassian Thorne stood in the captured war room with blood drying on one sleeve and a prisoner ledger beneath his hand. He was taller than the men around him, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, armored in black steel scarred by the morning's fighting. His face revealed little. His beta, Thomas Rourke, stood across the table. The inner keep is secured, Thomas said. Most of the garrison surrendered. Cassian's gaze remained on the ledger. His finger had stopped on one name, Elara Voss. Convicted under Article 9. Sentence: death. Charge: unauthorized opening of Eastern Gate during hostile advance. Associated casualties included Prince Rowan Thorne. For a moment, Cassian said nothing. Thomas noticed. That's her, the gate traitor. Cassian lifted his eyes. She was meant to hang this morning, Thomas added. For 12 months, Cassian had imagined the woman whose hand had opened Silverpine to chaos. Someone greedy enough to sell a city, cowardly enough to betray her own pack, cruel enough to let soldiers die. He had never expected to find her alive. Where is she? The lower cells. Cassian closed the ledger. I'll see her. The dungeon smelled of wet stone, old iron, and sickness. Cassian descended with Thomas and 2 guards, each step tightening something inside him. Then he reached the final corridor and stopped. A scent cut through the mildew, rain on pine needles, wild honey. It struck him so hard his hand closed around the stone wall. His wolf surged awake. Mine. Cassian's breath caught. No. The beast slammed against him again. Mate. Thomas turned. Cassian? Cassian was already moving. He reached the last cell and ripped the door open. The woman inside pushed herself upright against the wall. She was younger than he expected, perhaps 24. Thin from confinement, wrists burned beneath silver restraints, dark hair tangled around a face that should have looked defeated. It did not. Her green-gray eyes locked onto his. The mating bond hit them both. Elara gasped. Cassian felt the shock tear through his chest, violent and unmistakable. His wolf roared with recognition, and beneath it came something colder. Horror. This was the woman he believed had killed Rowan. This woman was his mate. Elara's gaze moved from his glowing eyes to the crown insignia on his armor. Understanding entered her expression. Not hope, bitterness. "Of course," she whispered. Cassian stepped closer. The silver at her wrists flashed against the torchlight. His wolf reacted instantly, a savage pressure under his ribs demanding that he tear the restraints away. Cassian forced himself still. He could smell burned skin beneath the metal. He could see the raw edges where the cuffs had cut her. Every instinct he possessed screamed to free her. But instinct was not evidence, and she was still the woman convicted of opening the gate that had swallowed his brother. His gaze lifted from her wrists to her face. "Did you open the eastern gate?" Thomas went still behind him. Elara looked directly at Cassian. "Yes." The word landed harder than any blade. Cassian's wolf rejected it. The king in him did not. His jaw tightened. "Then give me one reason I shouldn't let your sentence stand." For the first time, something changed in Elara's face. Bane, not fear. She met his eyes. "Because your brother died trying to save the same people I opened that gate for." The silence, after Elara's words, stretched through the cell. Cassian did not move. Behind him, Thomas shifted his weight, but even he seemed unwilling to break the moment. "What do you mean?" Cassian asked. Elara's wrists trembled beneath the silver restraints. She hid it by curling her hands into fists. "I mean, Rowan Thorne did not die because I lured him through that gate." "You expect me to believe that?" "No." Her voice was dry from the dungeon air. "I expect you to decide what you believe after you look at something other than the verdict." Cassian's expression hardened. The answer should have angered him. Instead, it made him look again at the restraints. The silver had burned through the skin in 2 places. His wolf surged, furious enough to make his vision sharpen gold at the edges. "Case." One of the guards hesitated. "Sire, Article 9 prisoners are to remain suppressed until—" Cassian turned his head. "Case." The guard obeyed. Metal clicked. The first cuff opened, then the second. Elara sucked in a breath when the silver left her skin, but she did not thank him. She simply lowered her hands into her lap and rubbed circulation back into her fingers. Cassian crouched far enough away not to crowd her. "You admitted opening the gate?" "Yes." "Without an Alpha's seal?" "Yes." "And Northern soldiers entered because of it?" "Yes." Thomas gave a low, frustrated breath. "Then what exactly is left to dispute?" Elara looked at him. "Inton." Cassian's gaze sharpened. "The tribunal did not prove I meant to betray Silverpine. It decided the law allowed them to presume it." Thomas frowned. "Because you opened a fortified gate to a hostile force." "I know what I did." Cassian stood. "Bring the trial record, and everything taken from her when she was confined." 20 minutes later, they were in an old guard chamber near the lower stairs. Elara was given water, bread, and a blanket, while a clerk arrived carrying a thick leather file and a shallow evidence box. The box contained a torn hair ribbon, 2 apothecary keys, a small silver field crest, and nothing else of value. Cassian's gaze paused on the crest. "Northern royal insignia. Rovan's." Elara noticed. "He gave it to me." Cassian looked at her. "When?" Her face closed. "Not yet." Thomas bristled, but Cassian let the answer stand. He ordered the box sealed again and turned to the trial file. The first pages were simple. Gate opened without authorization. Enemy forces entered. Casualties followed. Article 9 presumption invoked. Then came witness statements. Dozens. Cassian turned another page. More. "How many?" 217 civilian depositions, Your Majesty," the clerk said. Cassian looked up. "And they still convicted her?" A humorless smile touched Elara's mouth. "Ask him." The clerk shifted uneasily. The statements were classified as non-dispositive under wartime review. In common words, they were civilians, no sworn command rank. They could testify that Voss helped them escape, but not override the military record concerning why the gate was opened. Cassian flipped through several statements. "Smoke in the eastern quarter. locked passages, children carried through service tunnels, Elara dragging an elderly wolf from a collapsing stairwell. Again and again, the same pattern. You had 200 people saying she saved them. They could not establish when the emergency began. Elara finally broke off a piece of bread, then stopped. If the emergency began only after the northern breach, the Article 9 presumption remains unrebutted. Thomas leaned over the table. And if it began before, then Article 12 could have rebutted that presumption, the clerk said. Cassian looked at him. Could have? The necessity provision requires proof of an immediate threat to pack lives before the prohibited act. The original tribunal ruled there was no verified emergency before the gate opened. Elara's jaw tightened. So the difference between presumed treason and necessity was the order of events, Cassian said. No, Elara replied quietly. The difference was who was allowed to decide which events counted. Cassian looked back at the file. No detailed evacuation report. No independent fire start record. Only a signed military chronology stating northern troops entered at 11:43 p.m. and the eastern quarter fire was reported at 11:51. Too neat. Where are the original gate and bell records? In the old watch archive, if they survived. Fint them. Thomas glanced at Cassian. You're staying her execution? I am suspending it pending review. Elara's expression did not soften. A delay is not justice. No, Cassian said. It is time. For you, perhaps. An hour later, the clerk returned with a narrow wooden case coated in dust. Inside were mechanical strike sheets from the eastern bell tower. Cassian spread one beneath the lamp. 11:22 p.m. Evacuation bell. 11:43 p.m. Eastern gate opened. Thomas swore under his breath. The official tribunal had recorded the emergency 8 minutes after the breach. The bell tower proved an evacuation alarm had sounded 11 minutes before. Cassian slid the sheet toward Elara. The tribunal said the emergency began after the breach. Elara stared at the timestamp. For the first time since he entered her cell, genuine shock broke through her control. Then she lifted her eyes. Then someone rewrote the night. The bell record stayed on the table between them long after the court clerk had gone. 11 minutes. Cassian had fought wars decided in less time. He looked at Elara. Who could alter the tribunal chronology? Anyone who controlled the records before they reached the War Council. That narrows nothing. It narrows more than you think. Elara leaned over the strike sheet. Without the silver cuffs, some color had returned to her hands, though angry red burns still circled both wrists. The bell tower recorded itself mechanically, she said. If this survived, other records may have survived too. Thomas folded his arms. Such as? Quartermaster duplicates, maintenance logs, gatehouse inventories. Official copies went to the central archive. Working copies stayed with the people who moved supplies. Cassian studied her. You know where? I worked the Eastern Systems for 6 years. You were an apothecary. I was both. Thomas glanced at Cassian. Convenient. Elara's eyes sharpened. So was finding every piece of evidence against me exactly where the prosecution needed it. Cassian cut off the argument with a look. Take us there. The Eastern Service Archive occupied a narrow stone room beneath the old quartermaster's office. One wall had partially collapsed during the morning assault, leaving dust across shelves packed with warped ledgers. Elara stopped at the threshold. Cassian followed her gaze to the iron lock hanging from the inside edge of the door. The dungeon had left marks that did not show on her skin. He removed the lock and handed it to Thomas. Keep the door open. Elara said nothing, but entered. They searched for nearly an hour. Elara ignored most ledgers, checking dates, departmental marks, and binding thread before discarding them. Finally, she pulled a thin brown book from behind a row of grain accounts. Cassian watched her work. In the dungeon, she had looked half-starved and exhausted. Here, with a ledger beneath her fingers, she became precise, certain. He could see why people had trusted her with medicines, gates, and emergency stores. It unsettled him that the woman in front of him fit none of the image he had carried for a year. Elara caught him staring. What? Nothing. That is rarely true when kings say it. Eastern Quarter, emergency requisitions, she said, opening the ledger. The pages near the date of the broken gate showed ordinary requests. Lamp wicks, replacement hinges, flour, blankets. Then Elara stopped. 3 days before the battle, 24 barrels lamp oil, 6 barrels pine resin, 9 crates roofing pitch. Thomas frowned. For what? That much oil could light every corridor in the Eastern Quarter for months. Cassian read the destination. Civil defense storage. Was there construction? No. Elara's expression went still. That combination burns hot and sticks to stone. Cassian looked at her. You're saying someone stockpiled accelerants. I'm saying I want to know where they went. A voice came from the doorway. As do I. The guards turned. A tall man in a charcoal coat stood outside, empty hands visible. Dark blonde hair was silvering at his temples. He bowed. Lord Adrian Vale, former chief strategist to Alpha Garrick. Elara went rigid. Cassian saw it. Adrian did too. Lady Voss. Don't call me that. As you wish. Cassian stepped forward. You served on the war council that prosecuted her. I did. And yet you seem unsurprised to find us here. Your men requested surviving administrative officers. I assumed you would eventually require someone who understands Silverpine's records. Cassian held up the requisition. Adrian read it. I have never seen that copy. It came through your office, Elara said. My office processed hundreds of emergency requests. That does not mean I personally approved each one. Who did? Civil defense stores required Alpha Garrick's final seal. His answer was plausible. Too plausible to dismiss, too incomplete to trust. Remain available, Cassian said. Adrian bowed. Before leaving, he looked at Elara. For what it is worth, I argued against executing you until every appeal was exhausted. Elara's face stayed blank. Not hard enough. Adrian left. Thomas watched him go. You trust him? No, Cassian said. Elara looked at him. Good. Back in the guard chamber, a fresh meal waited on the table. Roast chicken, bread, broth. Elara sat but did not reach for it. Cassian remembered the untouched bread. You think we poisoned it? I spent 27 days eating whatever men who wanted me dead pushed through a slot. He took her plate, ate a piece of chicken, then drank from her cup. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Cassian pushed the plate back. Elara stared at him. That proves you're dramatic. It proves the food is safe. Those are not mutually exclusive. Thomas coughed to hide a laugh. Elara finally ate. Cassian returned to the requisition. Garrick was your Alpha? Yes. Where was he 3 days before the breach? Elara stopped chewing. At the Western Command Camp. How far? Nearly 60 miles. Cassian turned the page toward the lamp. At the bottom sat a dark blue wax impression, the personal seal of Alpha Garrick. Elara rose slowly. He took the royal seal whenever he left the fortress. Thomas leaned closer. Could he have authorized it before leaving? The requisition is dated 2 days after he left. Cassian stared at the seal of a man who could not have placed it there. Elara's voice dropped. He never signed this. The forged seal remained on the table. Cassian looked from the blue wax to Elara. Start at the beginning. Her expression tightened. You already know the beginning. I know what the tribunal wrote. That is not the same thing. No, he said. It isn't. Something in his answer made her pause. Elara sat again, but she did not touch the food. 3 days before the broken gate, the Eastern Quarter began receiving supplies that made no sense. Oil, pitch, resin. I questioned the store's clerk. He told me civil defense had ordered them. Did you report it? To Adrian. Thomas's head came up. He said Alpha Garrick had approved emergency firebreak preparations. I believed him. Cassian glanced at the impossible seal. Until that night. Elara looked toward the narrow window. At about 11:18, I was in the lower apothecary when a boy came running in with burns on his hands. He said smoke was coming through the schoolhouse vents. Cassian's attention sharpened. So the emergency began before the bell. Yes, the bell was not the first sign. It was the first surviving record. That distinction settled between them. I ran to the eastern quarter. Families were already trying to reach the western passage, but the iron doors had been chained from outside. Smoke was spreading through the upper streets. Her fingers closed around the edge of the table. There were children behind those doors, Cassian. It was the first time she had used his name. His wolf went still. I sent a runner to the command post. Then I found the watch captain. Most of his men had been reassigned, and he refused to abandon his post without written authority. What did you do? I pulled the eastern evacuation bell myself at 11:32. Cassian looked toward the strike sheet. The mechanical record now had a hand behind it. Then I found Adrian near the tower stairs. I told him the quarter was trapped and the fire was spreading. He said he would send soldiers and have the southern evacuation tunnel opened. But he didn't. No. Elara's voice flattened. I waited 4 minutes because I still believed someone with authority would come. Nobody did. The smoke turned black. The southern tunnel stayed shut. Thomas stared at her. And you went to the gate. The main eastern gate had a service corridor beside it. Open the gate and civilians could reach the outer road instead of being forced back through the burning quarter, with a northern vanguard outside. I knew northern forces were beyond the ridge. Did you know how close Rowan was? No, Cassian did. By then, Rowan had pursued Red Hand riders almost to Silverpine's eastern approach. Under Northern Crown doctrine, a hostile fortified gate opening without resistance was treated as surrender or a fleeting breach opportunity. Advance immediately. Secure the opening before the enemy could close it. Cassian had approved that doctrine himself. At 11:43, Elara said, I pulled the gate mechanism. 11 minutes after the alarm. 25 minutes after the first warning. Enough time for every lawful avenue she had tried to fail. Cassian remembered Rowan's reports. He would have gone through. Thomas looked at him. Rowan was following standing orders, Cassian said. Elara watched him carefully. Your orders? My doctrine. Silence. Cassian could have defended it. The doctrine had won sieges and prevented northern soldiers from being trapped at contested breaches. None of that changed what happened here. I taught my commanders that hesitation at an open hostile gate could cost an army, he said. Someone who understood our methods could have anticipated the response. Elara's anger shifted, not disappearing but changing shape. You think this was designed? I think accelerants were moved under a seal Garrick could not have placed. Civilians were trapped. Your command channels failed. Then a gate opened in front of a force trained to exploit it. Thomas swore softly. Elara looked down. For a year, everyone told me those deaths began with my hand on the lever. Cassian's voice lowered. They didn't begin there. Her eyes rose. Don't absolve me because your wolf wants me. I'm not. The answer came hard enough to still her. You opened it. People died after you did. I approved the doctrine Rowan followed. That matters too, but neither fact explains who prepared the fire or sealed the exits. For several seconds, neither looked away. Then Elara said, I still hear them. The civilians? The ones I couldn't reach. Cassian knew his own version of that sound. Rowan laughing before a campaign. Rowan's empty chair. Rowan's body returned beneath a northern banner. I still give orders expecting my brother to argue with them, he said. Elara's expression softened by a fraction. What was he like? Annoying. A small breath escaped her that might almost have been a laugh. A knock sounded. A northern guard entered carrying a sealed archive packet. Your Majesty, recovered from the former strategist's evidence vault, marked for the gate treason file. Thomas passed it to Cassian. The wax was old. The words inside hit harder. A dated entry placed Rowan in a private meeting with Elara hours before the breach. Cassian's eyes stopped on the final line. Voss has agreed to open the eastern gate. The fragile warmth in the room vanished. Elara stared at the page. That never happened. Cassian looked at his brother's name beneath the words. For the first time since the dungeon, he did not know which truth to trust. Cassian read Rowan's supposed field note a third time. The handwriting was close enough to hurt. The clipped strokes, the slant of the R, even the impatient pressure Rowan used when writing quickly. Voss has agreed to open the eastern gate. Across the table, Elara had gone very still. That meeting never happened, she said. Cassian looked at the date again. You knew Rowan. I saw him once before the breach, from a distance. This says you met privately for 20 minutes. It is lying. Thomas stepped closer. Cassian, we should verify the archive chain before. I know, but Cassian did not sound like a king weighing evidence. He sounded like a brother standing beside a grave. Elara heard the difference. Ask me, she said. His eyes lifted. Ask me what happened that night before you decide what this page means. For one dangerous second, Cassian almost did. Then his gaze dropped to Rowan's signature. A year of grief rushed into the silence. Rowan's body wrapped in a northern banner, the blood at his throat, the report that said the gate had opened from inside. Cassian closed the file. Until this document is authenticated, you are removed from the investigation. Elara started at him. Thomas's jaw tightened. Cassian. 48 hours, Cassian said. No contact with witnesses, no access to case materials. You think I forged it? I said I am verifying it. No. You are locking me away while you verify it. Cassian stood. You will be moved to the royal guest wing. 2 guards outside the door. You will have food, a healer, and anything reasonable you request. Her expression emptied. That was worse than anger. You already decided. I am preventing interference with evidence. You did not even let me answer. Cassian felt his wolf push against him, furious at the distance opening between them. He ignored it. This is temporary. So was the tribunal supposed to be. The words struck harder than he expected. A guard entered carrying a slim leather band set with a dull iron clasp. Elara looked at it, then at Cassian. What is that? A suppressant bracelet, Thomas said carefully. No silver. It only prevents shifting while you are under restricted movement. Cassian hated the way her face changed. Not fear. Recognition. Another institution. Another rule. Another man deciding that restraint was reasonable because he called it temporary. He should have stopped. Instead, grief made caution feel like duty. Put it on, he ordered. Elara did not resist when the guard fastened it around her wrist. That obedience made Cassian feel worse than defiance would have. She looked at him once. The first cage was built by men who hated me. Cassian's chest tightened. This is not a cage. Her gaze moved toward the guards waiting to escort her, then back to him. This one was built by a man I almost trusted. No one spoke. Elara walked out without another word. The royal guest chamber had clean sheets, a fireplace, food and windows overlooking the inner gardens. It also had a locked door. Elara stood in the middle of the room until she heard the key turn from the other side. For 27 days, she had learned every sound a lock could make. This one was quieter than the dungeon lock. It still sounded the same. She sat beside the cold fireplace and wrapped both hands around herself, refusing to cry. She had known better. A mating bond was instinct. It was not character. It was not trust. And Cassian had just proved that the moment trusting her became difficult, he would reach for authority before he reached for her. In the war room, Cassian did not sleep. He spread Rowan's surviving correspondence across the table beside the disputed field note. Thomas watched from the opposite side. You should have questioned her first. Cassian did not look up. I know. Then why didn't you? Because Rowan was dead. Because the document had used his brother's hand like a weapon. Because for one moment Cassian had wanted certainty more than truth. He said none of that. Instead, he compared ink, paper, stroke patterns, military shorthand. The handwriting matched disturbingly well. The paper was correct. The date notation was correct. Then he reached for the seal. Rowan's field correspondence carried a small black wax wolf head impression reserved for members of the Northern Royal House. Cassian held the question note beside an authentic dispatch written 2 weeks before Rowan died. Something was wrong. He brought both closer to the lamp. Thomas leaned in. What? The lower fang. On Rowan's authentic seal, the wolf's lower right fang was chipped. Cassian remembered when it happened. Rowan had dropped the brass stamp on a stone floor during a winter campaign and refused to replace it. The question document showed a perfect fang. Thomas frowned. Could he have used another seal? No. Cassian stood so quickly the chair struck the floor. He crossed to the crown inventory chest and pulled out the registry of royal seal molds. A replacement mold for Prince Rowan Thorne had been commissioned after his death for Memorial Archives. Cassian found the date. 4 months after the broken gate. His blood went cold. The seal on the document that had made him confine Elara had been made from a mold that did not exist when Rowan was alive. Forged. Cassian looked toward the corridor leading to the guest wing. Then at the key lying beside his hand. Cassian did not wait for morning. He crossed the guest wing with the forged document in one hand and the key in the other. Thomas followed 2 steps behind. The guards outside Elara's room straightened. Open it. One reached for the lock. Cassian stopped him. No, give me the key. The guard obeyed. Cassian unlocked the door himself. Elara was awake, sitting beside the dark window with the suppressant bracelet still around her wrist. The untouched dinner remained on the table. Cassian entered alone. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he placed Rowan's false field note on the table. It was forged. Elara's expression did not change. Cassian laid the authentic seal registry beside it. The impression came from a replacement mold commissioned 4 months after Rowan died. This document could not have existed on the date written here. Silence. I was wrong, he said. Elara looked at him then. I used fear as if it were evidence. Her eyes flicked toward the open door. You found that out quickly. Not quickly enough. Cassian held out his palm. The small key to the suppressant bracelet lay there. Elara stared at it. He could have removed the bracelet himself. His wolf wanted every sign of restraint gone. Cassian stayed where he was. You decide. Something shifted in her face. Not forgiveness, but attention. Elara took the key. Their fingers brushed for less than a second, but Cassian did not close his hand around hers. She unlocked the clasp herself and placed the bracelet on the table. The pressure suppressing her wolf disappeared. She flexed her wrist. For Cassian, the gesture was small. For Elara, it was the first choice anyone with power had returned to her in weeks. You have full access to the investigation again, Cassian said. No. The answer caught him off guard. You do not get to return what you took and call the account settled. I'm not. Then what are you doing? Correcting what I can. And the rest? I don't know yet. It was the first answer he had given her that did not sound like a king pretending certainty. Cassian placed another document on the table. I have filed my recusal from any judgment concerning your conviction. Her head turned sharply. What? I cannot be your mate, Rowan's brother, the sovereign occupying Silverpine, and the man deciding whether you are guilty. You managed all 4 yesterday. No. His jaw tightened. I pretended I could. That was part of the mistake. Elara looked down at the document. A second page carried a formal petition requesting that the Independent Moon Tribunal reopen her case. You petitioned them? Yes. They haven't accepted. Not yet. So legally, nothing has changed. Your execution remains stayed. The prior judgment still exists until an independent court decides whether it was valid. She studied him carefully, and if they refuse review, then I find another lawful way to challenge the record. I will not pardon you into innocence, and I will not declare you innocent because you are my mate. That reached her. Not enough to heal what he had done. Enough to make her listen. A knock sounded. Thomas entered carrying a worn tribunal witness list. We found one of the civilians. Elara stood. Mara Ellison, Thomas said. Schoolmistress from the Eastern Quarter. She gave a deposition after the broken gate, then disappeared before the second hearing. Cassian looked at him. Dead? Alive. Hidden under another name south of Blackmere. Elara moved closer. Why? Her original statement was altered. Cassian's attention sharpened. How? She said Red Hand soldiers were already inside the Eastern Quarter before the Northern breach. Elara went still. That was not in my trial record. No. The official copy says she saw unidentified armed men after the gate opened. Another timeline changed. Another witness rewritten. Bring her here, Cassian said. Thomas hesitated. She refused Crown protection. 2 witnesses who planned to support her account died before the tribunal reconvened. Cassian glanced at Elara. There it was again. The cost of asking frightened people to trust powerful institutions. Then she does not come under my custody. Thomas waited. Request a neutral Moon Council recorder and escort. Mara chooses whether she enters Silverpine, where she stays, and who is present when she speaks. No private Crown interrogation. Thomas nodded. I'll arrange it. After he left, Elara looked at Cassian. You expected me to notice. I expected you to distrust any arrangement I controlled. You're learning. I'm trying. Cassian did not ask whether that mattered. He had already learned that trust offered under pressure was only another kind of obedience. By late afternoon, hoofbeats sounded in the courtyard. Thomas returned with a woman wrapped in a grey traveling cloak. Beside her walked a neutral Moon Council recorder carrying a sealed witness ledger, not a judge, and not proof that Elara's appeal had been accepted, only protection against another testimony disappearing. Mara looked exhausted, wary, and older than her 38 years. Her eyes found Elara immediately. Elara. Mara. Mara glanced at Cassian, then at the neutral recorder. You said my words would be copied before anyone here could change them. They will, Cassian said. Mara drew a shaky breath. Then she looked back at Elara. I saw who locked us inside. Mara's testimony began with a locked schoolhouse door. The neutral recorder sat at one end of the table, Quill moving steadily while Mara faced Cassian, Thomas, and Elara. No Northern guard stood inside the room. I was teaching night lessons when the first smoke came through the vents, Mara said. We tried the western exit. It had been chained from outside. Did you see who did it? Cassian asked. 3 men. Red leather wrapped around their sword arms. The Red Hand. Thomas leaned forward. Before Northern soldiers entered Silverpine. Mara looked at him sharply. Long before. I heard the evacuation bell after they locked us in. Your soldiers were not inside yet. The recorder's quill paused only long enough to dip in ink. Cassian glanced at Elara. 11 minutes. The bell log, the oil requisitions, and now a living witness all pointed in the same direction. Did you see Adrian Vale? Thomas asked. No. The answer mattered. Mara was not giving them a convenient villain, only what she had seen. One of the men said the East Road had to stay sealed until the Northern wolves crossed the ridge, Mara continued. Then they left us there. Cassian's attention sharpened. Those exact words? Yes. Elara's face drained of color. Mara reached across the table and covered her hand. You came for us. Elara swallowed. I opened the service corridor. You broke the chain yourself. With an iron hook. You carried my son when he could not breathe. Elara looked away. Cassian saw the old guilt settle over her shoulders again. Mara's testimony could not by itself prove who had designed the massacre, but it did something the original tribunal had refused to do. It placed the civilian emergency before the breach. When the recorder finished, he sealed 2 identical copies. Mara kept one. Only then did Thomas bring out the small silver insignia Elara had surrendered from her personal effects after the dungeon search. Cassian recognized it instantly. Rowan's field crest. He stared at Elara. You had this? For a year. Why? Her fingers tightened. Because he gave it to me. Thomas turned the crest over. There is a seam. Cassian took it. The backing plate was slightly raised. He pressed the hidden catch with his thumbnail. The silver plate opened. Inside lay a strip of paper folded so tightly it was nearly part of the metal. Cassian stopped breathing. Rowan's handwriting. This time the seal was unnecessary. He knew every impatient stroke. Eastern Quarter burning before full breach. Silverpine banners firing on their own civilians. Something is wrong. Cassian read it twice. Then he looked at Elara. You knew this was inside? No? You never opened it? He told me to give it to you. I thought the crest itself was the message. Cassian's voice changed. When? Elara went silent. Thomas understood before Cassian did. He stepped toward the door. I'll give you the room. The recorder followed him out. Cassian remained opposite Elara. For months he had imagined Rowan's final moments as a battlefield report. Breach, resistance, casualty. Now Elara stood between him and the truth. Were you with him when he died? Yes. The word barely carried. Every instinct in Cassian demanded details. Instead, he forced himself to ask the question that mattered differently now. Can you tell me what happened? Elara looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. Rowan came through the eastern corridor after the first northern soldiers entered. He saw civilians running toward the outer road and realized something was wrong. He started ordering your men away from the schoolhouse instead of deeper into the city. Cassian could see his brother doing it, ignoring the battle plan the moment people needed him more. There was fighting near the Grain Arch, Elara continued. Red Hand men were mixed with Silverpine soldiers. One of them attacked Rowan from behind. Cassian's hands curled at his sides. What weapon? A hooked cavalry blade. Her voice shook now. It caught him across the side of the neck. Blood at his throat. The image from the burial chamber returned with brutal clarity. He killed the man, Elara said, then tried to keep moving. I found him near the burning corridor. Was he conscious? Yes. Cassian's throat tightened. I tried to stop the bleeding. I packed the wound. I used everything I had. Her composure cracked, but it had cut too deep. Cassian wanted to reach for her. He stopped himself. Elara noticed. That small restraint seemed to undo something in her. He knew he was dying, she whispered. He gave me the crest and told me to tell his brother that the gate wasn't the betrayal. Cassian closed his eyes. Did he suffer? For a little while. Elara refused to lie to him, but he wasn't alone. When Cassian opened his eyes again, hers were wet. He made me promise to keep getting people out. Her hand trembled against the table. Cassian did not take it. He waited. After several seconds, Elara turned her palm upward and reached across the space between them. Cassian closed his hand around hers. No bond commanded it. No law required it. She chose the contact. For a moment, grief was simply grief. Then Thomas knocked once and entered, expression grim. There is another line. Cassian released Elara only when she did. Thomas pointed to the bottom edge of Rowan's paper, where the fold had hidden a final sentence. Cassian flattened it beneath the lamp. The Red Hand knew our advance route before we crossed the gate. Silence fell. Cassian read the sentence again. The words did not tell him how the Red Hand had learned Rowan's approach. Scouts could have tracked the vanguard. A dispatch could have been intercepted. Someone inside Silverpine could have coordinated the timing, but one fact was suddenly impossible to ignore. The Red Hand had been preparing around Rowan's expected approach before he crossed the gate. Elara looked from the note to Cassian. They were waiting for him. Cassian's face hardened. Or waiting for exactly what his arrival would start. Someone had prepared for the northern advance before Elara ever touched the gate. The next morning, the Eastern Records Room became a war table. Rowan's note lay beside Mara's testimony, the bell log, the oil requisitions, and the forged field document that had sent Elara back behind a locked door. Cassian stood over them with Thomas while Elara sorted a stack of trade ledgers. Someone moved supplies through Silverpine without using military accounts, she said. Thomas handed her another ledger. Black Hollow Trading Company. The name appeared again. Oil. Resin. Leather armor. Dried provisions. Payments to border carriers later identified as Red Hand suppliers. Cassian traced one coded transfer with his finger. Who owns it? No one useful, Thomas said. The registered director died 6 years ago. Convenient. Very. Elara turned another page. Each large transaction ended in 2 short number groups instead of a signature. What are these? Thomas studied them. Emergency. Account authentication codes. Senior Silverpine officers used rotating cipher wheels so field clerks could verify orders without carrying a noble's written seal. Can we identify whose office issued them? Not from these copies. The transaction code only proves an authorized cipher was used. To tie it to a person, we would need the corresponding wheel or the office ledger recording that day's key. Elara sat back. So Black Hollow proves someone with high access built the network. Not Adrian, Cassian said. Not yet. That distinction mattered. Adrian had not hidden. He spent the morning meeting surviving council members and demanding an open inquiry. Word spread through Silverpine that the Alpha King was manufacturing evidence to save his fated mate. He is making himself look innocent by asking for scrutiny, Elara said, because he believes the chain stops before it reaches him. Does it? For now. A knock interrupted them. A neutral courier from the Moon Council entered carrying a white-sealed packet. Cassian broke the seal. The Independent Moon Tribunal had accepted jurisdiction to review Elara's conviction. Not overturned it. Not cleared her. Accepted review. Elara read the notice twice. Her hand tightened around the page. Cassian watched her. You expected to feel different. I expected to feel something. You don't? I spent a year being told the law had already decided who I was. Apparently learning it may reconsider is less dramatic than I imagined. Cassian did not tell her to be grateful. Thomas left to arrange the tribunal evidence transfer. Cassian opened a black leather case marked with the Northern Crown seal. Elara looked at it. What is that? Our intelligence archive from the months before the Broken Gate. You said some of it was restricted. It was. He pushed the case toward her. Inside were unredacted scout reports, intercepted trade codes, informant payments, and military route summaries. Elara looked up. All of it? All of it. You are giving a woman still under treason review access to Crown intelligence. Yes. Your council would call that reckless. My council has called me worse. That is not an answer. Cassian met her eyes. I should have trusted what you did before I trusted what I feared. The room went quiet. Part of Elara wanted to punish him with silence. Another part recognized what lay between them. Not an apology. Access. Risk. Trust made concrete. She sat beside him. For 2 hours they followed Black Hollow transactions through border brokers and abandoned warehouse accounts. The same authentication format appeared before Red Hand movements, but never with the office key needed to name the official behind it. Elara rubbed her temple. Cassian noticed. You need rest. I need the next ledger. You have been awake since before dawn. So have you. I am larger. That is your argument? It is the only one I have left. Despite herself, she smiled. A guard outside shifted. A key ring struck the stone wall. Elara's body locked. The smile vanished. Cassian saw it. What happened? Nothing. That was not nothing. She stared at the table. Then quietly, I hate the sound of keys in locks. Cassian did not move. In the dungeon, I could tell which guard was coming by how many keys he carried. At night, I would hear the turn before the door opened. She looked irritated with herself. I know this room is not locked. My body does not seem interested in the distinction. Cassian's jaw tightened. He did not reach for her. He only said, You should not have had to tell me twice. Later, when Elara returned from washing ink from her hands, the guards had moved to the far end of the corridor. The records room door remained open. Cassian said nothing about it. That affected her more than if he had. They worked into the night. At some point, Thomas left to question a broker. Cassian and Elara remained alone beneath a single lamp. You are different from the man who locked that door, she said. I'm trying to be. That does not erase it. I know. She stepped closer. The mating bond stirred between them. Cassian did not close the distance. Elara did. Her hand touched his jaw. Then she kissed him, briefly. When she pulled away, his eyes had turned gold. That was not forgiveness. I know. You do not get to assume anything changed. I won't. She searched his face, then turned back to the ledgers. Good. Help me with this. A minute later, Elara froze. 3 chemical codes appeared beside Black Hollow's mark. Hemlock concentrate. Silverwort extract. Bitter ash salts. Cassian leaned over her shoulder. What? In the wrong proportions? Fever, paralysis, death. She followed the entry across the page. Destination: Silverpine Municipal Cistern Service. Delivery status: received. Date: yesterday. Elara looked at Cassian. They're not buying poison for later. A bell began ringing somewhere below. They already brought it inside. The alarm bell below was not ringing for fire. Elara knew the pattern. 3 short strikes. Pause. 3 more. Water system breach. She was already moving before Cassian reached the door. The main cistern feeds half the lower city, she said. If those compounds entered the distribution chamber, we may have minutes before the pumps carry them outward. Cassian caught up beside her. What do you need from me? The question stopped her for half a heartbeat. Not, you are staying here. Not, I will handle it. 3 people who can move quietly. No royal banners. And no one deciding for me when to turn back. Cassian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Done. Thomas joined them on the stairs with 2 northern scouts. Elara chose a Silverpine engineer as the 3rd. The municipal cistern lay beneath the eastern quarter, reached through maintenance tunnels older than the fortress itself. The deeper they went, the stronger the chemical bitterness became. Elara touched the damp wall. They've already opened a mixing line. Ahead, voices echoed. Through the archway below, 6 red-hand mercenaries guarded the pumping chamber, and beside them stood Adrian Vale. He was burning papers over a maintenance brazier. For a second, his calm expression vanished. Then it returned. Your Majesty, he said. You arrive everywhere eventually. Cassian stepped forward. Step away from the pumps. Adrian smiled. You still think this is about the pumps? He kicked a brass lever. Machinery groaned beneath them. Water surged through the underground pipes. Elara ran for the control wheel. 2 red-hand men moved to stop her. Thomas intercepted one. Cassian drove the other against the stone railing. Chaos exploded through the chamber. Elara reached the dosing manifold. 3 glass reservoirs had been connected directly to the water feed. 2 were full. The 3rd was half empty. Her stomach dropped. Cassian. He turned. Some of it is already in the system. How long? I don't know. Adrian backed toward a side passage. That is the problem with kings, he called. They always arrive after the choice has been made. Cassian moved toward him. Elara grabbed the emergency valve. It would not turn. She looked at the distribution gauges. 4 lower city lines were already pressurizing. Cassian. He stopped. Adrian was 10 yards away. 1 corridor between them. A year of grief stood in that distance. Roven. The forged trial. The fire. Everything. Elara pointed toward the evacuation alarm. Get the lower wards off the water lines. Now. Cassian looked at Adrian. Then at her. If I leave, I can do this. For 1 second she expected the old answer. Instead, Cassian nodded. I trust you. He turned away from Adrian. Thomas, evacuate the lower wards. Shut every public water gate east of the market. Adrian's composure cracked. You're letting me walk? Cassian did not look back. I'm choosing the people you expected me to sacrifice. Adrian disappeared into the side passage. Cassian followed Thomas toward the city. Elara stayed, because he had trusted her to. The engineer dropped beside the manifold. The main shutoff is jammed. Then we bypass it. How? Elara ripped open the emergency cabinet. Charcoal filters, lime powder, copper mesh. Not enough to purify the whole cistern. Enough to bind the compounds before they passed through the secondary pumps if she changed the flow. Open the drain channel. That will empty half the reservoir. Better thirsty than dead. Together they forced the overflow gates open. Contaminated water thundered into the waste channel. Elara packed charcoal and lime into the emergency filter beds, while one scout held pressure on the damaged intake valve. The third reservoir cracked. Chemical liquid splashed her forearm. Pain flared instantly. She wrapped the burn in her sleeve and kept working. Again, the engineer turned the bypass wheel. The pressure gauge fell. One line, then another. Finally, the last red marker dropped below distribution level. Elara sagged against the railing. The poison had stopped. Behind the brazier, one scout shouted, "Lady Voss." He had kicked aside Adrian's burning papers. Beneath them lay a metal ledger case. Inside were black hollow transaction sheets, the original office ledger for the current cipher rotation, and a brass cipher wheel stamped with Adrian Vale's strategist mark. "That is his office wheel." A wounded courier nearby laughed bitterly. I carried the rotation key. Thomas returned with soldiers 20 minutes later. The courier was alive. The ledger was intact. The wheel matched the coded transactions they had traced in Part 8's records. Old oil purchases, red hand payments, and the current poison shipment. The chain no longer stopped at Black Hollow. It reached Adrian. Thomas looked toward the side passage. We caught him at the southern postern. Adrian was brought back under neutral guard, wrists bound. His gaze landed on the evidence case. For the first time, he looked tired. Cassian said nothing. Elara did. Rowan knew, didn't he? Adrian smiled faintly. He understood too much after he entered the eastern quarter. Cassian's face went still. "Did you order his death?" Adrian's eyes shifted to him. "I ordered the Red Hand not to let him leave with what he had seen." No one mistook the words for the evidence that convicted Adrian. The ledger, cipher wheel, courier, and current operation had already done that work. But the final cruelty was now named. Elara held Adrian's gaze. "We already proved what you did." Her voice did not shake. "All you gave us was the reason." Adrian said nothing more. Cassian turned away from him. His gaze found the chemical burn on Elara's arm. He crossed the chamber, then stopped before touching her. "Can I?" Elara looked at him. A few days earlier, he would have decided. Now he waited. She nodded. Cassian lifted her carefully into his arms. "I trusted you to leave," she murmured. His mouth almost curved. "That may be the strangest compliment I've ever received. You earned it." By nightfall, Adrian sat under neutral guard. The poison plot was stopped. The evidence was secured. But Silverpine was not quiet. In the courtyard below the keep, two chants rose against each other. "Adrian is the traitor." Then another voice answered. "She still opened the gate." Others joined. Cassian stood beside Elara at the window. Adrian's guilt did not erase her legal question. "Adrian's guilt does not decide yours," he said. "I know." A knock sounded. A white-robed messenger entered carrying the seal of the Independent Moon Tribunal. "The tribunal has convened." Elara turned. The messenger bowed. "Elara Voss, at dawn, the court is ready to hear why you opened the gate." Dawn came cold and clear over Silverpine. Elara stood before the Independent Moon Tribunal with a fresh bandage around her burned forearm and no restraints on her wrists. Cassian sat behind the public rail beside Thomas, wearing no crown and carrying no weapon. For once, he was not the authority in the room. The chamber was crowded. Mara sat with Eastern Quarter survivors. Silverpine nobles filled one side, northern officers the other. Outside, hundreds waited in the courtyard. Adrian Vale was not present. His criminal hearing would come later. This one belonged to Elara. The presiding judge opened the original gate treason file. "Elara Voss, the prior tribunal found that your intentional opening of the eastern gate triggered Article 9's presumption of treason." Elara held still. The judge placed the forged chronology beside the authentic bell record. We now know that judgment rested on materially falsified command records, suppressed witness statements, and altered evidence. The original conviction is void. A murmur moved through the chamber. That does not end our review. Elara knew. Adrian's crimes did not erase her hand from the gate lever. The evidence establishes that you knowingly opened a fortified gate without lawful authorization while hostile forces were outside Silverpine. Article 9's presumption was therefore triggered. No one breathed. But the same evidence establishes an immediate threat to hundreds of pack lives, compromised command channels, a deliberately obstructed evacuation, and no primary intent on your part to aid the enemy. The judge closed the file. Article 12 rebuts that presumption. His gaze settled on Elara. Elara Voss, this tribunal finds you not guilty of treason. For a moment, she felt nothing. Then Mara began to cry. Someone whispered, "Finally." Elara closed her eyes. 27 days underground. A year of being named before she could speak. Rowan bleeding beneath her hands. 2 locked doors. None of it disappeared. But the word traitor no longer belonged to her. When she opened her eyes, Cassian was watching. He did not approach. He waited. Elara walked to him. Only then did he offer his hand. She took it. By midday, the eastern courtyard was packed. Cassian stood before Silverpine and the Northern Crown together. This time he wore the crown, not to overrule the tribunal, to answer for what belonged to him. "The court has spoken on Elara Voss," he said. "I will speak on myself." The courtyard quieted. "The military doctrine I approved taught my commanders to seize an open hostile gate before it could close. That doctrine made Rowan's response predictable. Adrian Vale's network exploited that predictability, and my brother paid for it. A ripple moved through the northern ranks. I did not design the massacre, but a king does not become innocent of consequence merely because another man intended the harm." Cassian continued. "And when forged evidence later touched my grief, I confined a woman whose case I had promised to judge by evidence. I called fear, caution, and authority procedure. No excuse followed. I was wrong. Cassian announced that the Crown would support reforms submitted to the Moon Council. Civilian testimony would receive standing when military records were disputed. Necessity claims would receive independent review, and wartime treason proceedings could not rely on command records without preserved duplicate evidence. They were corrections, not rewards. 3 days later, Cassian found Elara at the eastern gate. The damaged stone had been cleaned. The old memorial remained, but a second column now stood beside it. The fallen, 312 names. Next to them, the saved, 217 names. Elara touched Mara's son's name. Cassian stopped beside her. "Adrian's network is being dismantled," he said. "The tribunal froze every Black Hollow account." "That sounds like something Thomas told you to say because you do not know how to begin this conversation." He suggested administrative matters first. She almost smiled. Cassian looked toward the open road. "The moon chose you as my mate." Elara's expression guarded. "It did not choose your future." Cassian turned toward her. "I want you beside me, but I will not use fate, gratitude, or a crown to make that decision for you. What if I refuse?" "Then you refuse, and you let me walk out that gate?" His wolf hated the question. The man answered, "Yes." Elara studied him. "If I become Luna, I will not be decorative. I would be terrified if you were. I want independent healers protected from Alpha interference, civilian evacuation authority, review of emergency convictions, and if I sit on your council, I vote. You negotiate like someone holding a knife. I am an apothecary. We prefer poison." Cassian laughed. Elara looked at the open gate again. She had once pulled its lever knowing people might hate her forever. Now no one was forcing her hand. "I will not be your Luna because the moon chained us together," she said. Cassian's expression did not move, but she felt the ache through the bond. Elara stepped closer. I will be your Luna because when revenge was finally in front of you, you chose your people. And when you were wrong about me, you learned how to give power back. His breath caught. That sounds dangerously close to forgiveness. Do not ruin it. I wouldn't dare. She rose onto her toes and kissed him. This time she did not pull away after a heartbeat. When they separated, Cassian rested his forehead against hers. Behind them stood the names of the dead. Beside them stood the names of those who had lived. Ahead, the eastern gate remained open beneath the morning sun. The law had once called Elara a traitor for opening it. In the end, the kingdom remembered why she had.